Hey everybody, welcome to another Ishaan S Show Daily. Today we're going to be talking about the people that I think are on Trump's shortlist to be vice president. Now, this is a topic that I've taken a very deep interest in. Back in 2016, I watched the vice presidential selection process very closely for Trump and for Hillary Clinton. Of course, we got Mike Pence and Tim Kaine out of that. Then in 2020, I watched very closely when they did the Democrats, when they were picking their vice president, and we got Kamala Harris. So I've been watching this for a few years now, and the Veep stakes is something that I really enjoy. We like to call it the Veep stakes in politics because it's kind of like one of those fun little terms we get to throw around. But as we look at this Republican primary, and I've talked about it before, Trump is in his own league and he seems to be winning and running away with this nomination. So I don't really want to talk about the other candidates in the race and who might be their vice president. I feel safe enough to make that jump that if it were just left to the numbers in terms of polling and whatnot, I really do think that Trump will have the opportunity to pick a vice president. And I don't think it's going to be Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis picking somebody. So for Donald Trump, this is one of those big articles that I've been trying to write. So for Donald Trump, what I think he is looking for in a vice president, he really does not need to consolidate any part of the Republican Party. In politics and presidential politics, when you pick a vice president, it is usually to unite your party so that when you are in the general election, you have a united front as a party ready to support the presidential candidate. That's usually what you do. But going into this election, a little more unique, Donald Trump has most of the Republican Party in line. There is a very small segment that is not interested in him, and I don't think that might be a big group in certain places for sure, and whoever he picks as vice president shouldn't turn off those people, but I don't think that he needs to pick somebody substantial enough where it's like where you're carrying an entire wing. Back in 2016, Trump picked Mike Pence because Trump really struggled with the evangelical voter base, and it showed. Like in the Iowa caucuses 8 years ago, we're on the cusp of the Iowa caucuses this year, but 8 years ago in the Iowa caucuses, Trump did very poorly as it came down to the numbers. He lost Iowa because he did not resonate very well with the traditional evangelical religious voters there. And his decision to pick Mike Pence was in part based on trying to secure that group. And that is traditionally what a vice president is supposed to do. The vice presidential pick, of course, you're picking somebody who can be a good deputy, who you can work with and whatnot, blah, blah, blah. But really what matters is somebody who can complement you on the presidential ticket. And I think that is going to be something Trump is thinking about very much this time. But it's not going to be one of those situations where it's going to be politically speaking. I think it's going to be more about his relationship. Trump really values loyalty. He values, people he thinks are the right people to take on his banner. And I think some of the people on my list are not likely to get considered, and some people are more than likely to be shoo-ins for this. But ultimately, it depends on how he sees the trajectory of the 2024 election, whether or not he needs to balance the needs and interests of moderate voters, or if he thinks that he needs to pick somebody for his base, or maybe he wants to freestyle it and he's thinking ahead and he wants people that he can work with for the next 4 years. So there are a lot of things. Trump has said he likes the idea of picking a woman to be his running mate. He said that he wants to pick a loyalist to serve with him, but Trump being Trump obviously can pull the rug from underneath everyone's feet and could just opt to pick somebody who checks none of his boxes. But at a Fox News town hall last night at a Fox News town hall, he was actually talking about how he had already made up his mind. The moderators asked him, they're like, who are you thinking about vice presidents? Are you starting to consider people? He actually said he knows who he wants. He said he can't tell who it is, but he said, quote, I know who it's going to be. He was very confident in saying that, and that was the reason. Actually, I was supposed to publish this article in a few weeks, but when I heard that, I was like, wow, okay, Trump is kind of trying to play around with the schedule here. So I pushed this out today. And it's because I don't know Trump that well, in terms of, no one knows him in that sense. His thinking, he could very well announce in the next few weeks just for the fun of it. So I think it's important that this was noted, that he has actually already decided on who he wants to pick, or maybe he hasn't talked to the people yet. I don't know. But he said that. He said this line here at the Fox News town hall last night. Now, going in, I know I just kind of revealed it, but the way I divided this group of 10 people, you can see the 10 people here, I divided it into three groups. The pundit favorites, that means people that the news media would love to see and talk about all the time. For the base, that's just for Trump's base, and mini Trumps. And for the base and mini Trumps are not all that different, but I'll explain it as we get there. But I want to start first with the pundit favorites. These are the people that the media loves to speculate about. These are people that media talks about constantly. First is former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. I know Nikki Haley is not actually at the top of many people's lists right now for vice president, and it's mainly because she is running against Donald Trump, but it's become incredibly vicious. And now that Chris Christie's out of the race, Nikki Haley is actually the most non-Trump candidate in this race, even if she's not necessarily there. Chris Christie has actually refused to endorse Nikki Haley because he kind of has this feeling that Nikki is running for vice president in the end. Nikki Haley has outright denied this, and she says it's insulting for people to think that she's running for vice president, but it's definitely something that has to have crossed her mind. And as she runs through this election, she is trying to, I think, highlight that there's a division within the Republican Party. It doesn't seem like a really big one, but she's trying to make it seem like it's big, that there is a Trump and a distinctly anti-Trump wing of the party. And I think by doing that, she is trying to indicate, if she is interested for vice president, I think she's trying to indicate that Trump needs her. And electability-wise, I think it wouldn't actually be a stupid decision for Trump to pick Haley, because Haley is doing well in the polls as a general election candidate. She has an appeal to independent and moderate voters. She wins against Joe Biden by 17 points, as she likes to say. Trump, on the other hand, has lost to Joe Biden, and it's a little weak. He's a weaker candidate when it comes to that any general election scenario. Trump is not the strongest candidate. So maybe having Nikki Haley on the ticket helps balances things. The plus side is that he's worked with her. He understands her temperament, and Nikki Haley is one of the very few people in the Trump administration that left without an incident. She left on her own terms, so they did have a good working relationship. They got along. It's just now that they're running against each other, their attack ads on each other and whatnot. But again, I'd remind everybody that Kamala Harris ran against Joe Biden, and that got pretty vicious too when it was. And, you know, whatever, like 9 months later, Biden picked her to be his VP. So it's not out of the question. And Nikki Haley does check a lot of boxes in terms of just the diversity-wise that Trump has been thinking about. And the only thing that, holds me back from thinking that Nikki Haley could be Trump's VP is the fact that Trump has already talked about it. There were reports going around after a recent New Hampshire poll. I think we covered it here on the channel, but there was this there was this thing that was going around that Trump has been actually talking about picking Nikki Haley to be vice president, but there's a lot of pushback from his sons and his allies. A lot of people were saying, no way, Jose, you are not going to pick Trump. Even other people on this list have criticized Trump for thinking about Nikki Haley. They're saying it's a mistake. I don't think it would be as big a mistake as they're making it out to be, but it wouldn't necessarily be a good, cordial relationship. And the fact that she's running against him, that's a huge liability, because Trump, unlike Biden, who said that he was strongly considering people who ran against him, Trump is not very tolerant of disloyalty. And this is an act of disloyalty if you really put your head to it. So that's where I think Nikki Haley is. Then I have South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. Tim Scott is another presidential candidate, also ran, who suspended his campaign in November. He's not necessarily the strongest candidate. He's also a fellow South Carolinian, and just like Haley, he has an inspiring story about when as it pertains to race and his diversity that he can bring to that ticket. But the thing with Scott is he has had really poor polling numbers when he was running for president, and he struggled with running a national campaign. He had a really hard time trying to find his place. And in terms of media skills, I've watched Tim Scott a lot before this race, and I watched Tim Scott during the election, or whatever, the primary election. And he does struggle a little with media. Not that Kamala Harris doesn't struggle with media. Kamala Harris also has her own gaffes, of course, that we've seen. It's just she has a way of commanding the media. I don't think Tim Scott's that strong with the media. And that could be an issue for him, especially as the vice president. One of the main jobs of a vice presidential candidate is to be the chief attack dog for the president, like for the presidential candidate. Like, you are in charge of going after people that say something about your presidential candidate. You are on the TV shows, you are doing the interviews, you are going out there you were attacking the other side, basically. And that doesn't fit Tim Scott. Tim Scott marketed himself as this nice, polite, and decent candidate, which I think would have fared really well if he was the presidential candidate. But as a VP candidate, that's not traditionally what they are looking for. You are looking for a more feisty person in that VP role. However, Scott is a very skilled fundraiser. He knows how to make money. He knows how to raise money for his party, and he knows how to raise money for his own elections. So he would bring in money, I feel like, and he resonates deep with that evangelical base. That was one of the segments of the voter base that he was actually doing really well with. And that's why he was at one point the third place candidate in Iowa, I believe, because he was resonating with evangelical voters. I don't know if that's a priority for Donald Trump, though, this time, because, although Trump picked Mike Pence all those years ago for this, I don't think that he's really thinking about that right now. But that's Tim Scott. Next, I think, is the most likely candidate to be vice president. I have this really strong feeling that it's going to be Kristi Noem. But the reason I say that is that Kristi Noem has been a friend, an ally of Donald Trump's for a really long time. And Trump has privately expressed this interest. Like, before all this stuff with Nikki Haley, Trump was talking about Kristi Noem. And Kristi Noem and Ron DeSantis, I like to talk about them coming up together because they both have very similar careers in that they started in the House around the same time. They became governor the same year, governors of their states, and they both were in charge during COVID and all of the stuff that happened in 2020. So they both were able to build these distinct identities among themselves about being these culture war champions and being these right-wing, sweethearts. But the difference is Ron DeSantis took the route of running against Donald Trump, which has cost him dearly. And now, unlike what some people were previously saying that now's not his time, he should just drop out and wait until 2028, now people are actively rooting against him. And Ron DeSantis may actually very well be seeing the dark end of his political career. So, but on the other hand, you have Kristi Noem, who made a different decision, and she decided not to go in this race, even though there were speculations that she could run. Instead, she endorsed Trump back in September, I believe, and she has done a lot in terms of pushing the conservative agenda. Now, the thing is, she hasn't built a huge national name for herself, so if you go around to some places in the country, people will most likely not know who she is, but that's fine because she has been trying to push her name out in recent years. I know in the 2022 midterms that year, and just throughout the year, and I think last year too, she started pushing out ads through her own national PAC. So she has been trying to push herself out there, and she is the ideal candidate for the MAGA base. And you know how I was talking about how Tim Scott's a bit of a weaker candidate when it comes to, the attack dog status? I think Kristi Noem is actually a really strong candidate in that respect. She knows how to hit the people at the right spot. And she's actually criticizing people on this list, like Nikki Haley. I was talking about how Trump was talking about picking Nikki Haley. Kristi Noem actually a few days ago came out and said, that's going to be a really bad idea if you pick Nikki Haley. If that doesn't scream pick me, I'm not sure what does. But with Kristi's a little too far to the right agenda, I think it might be an issue for her in states like Michigan and Arizona, which are going to be close, because she's going to have to explain some of her positions on some issues, especially her handling of COVID and other culture war issues that are going to be very divisive. Next, Marco Rubio. I think he is one of the least likely people to get picked, but I added him because he was talked a lot about in the pundit circle. Marco Rubio ran against Trump in 2016, but in the years since back, if you ran against Trump in 2016, that wasn't that bad, because even Trump understands that there was a little bit of uncertainty about whether or not he would actually win that nomination. But in the years since, Marco Rubio and Trump have become friends, and they are close. And since then as well, Rubio's clout has diminished. He's not been as big of a person in politics. He's not that much involved in things. He's stayed silent. So that's where I think he loses points, because Rubio has not been very vocal. He's not been very loud. But coming from Florida, I feel like that could be something interesting. There might be a law or something about not being from the same state as your vice president. That may conflict. I don't know about that. Look into it maybe. But Rubio has a very close relationship with Donald Trump. And it's important for Trump, again, to have somebody who is loyal and who he can trust not to turn on him, unlike Nikki Haley or Ron DeSantis. So I think that's why this Floridian might be one of the better candidates for Trump. Then on to the mini Trumps, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm sure everybody watching this video knows very well about. She is one of the hardliners, but ever since Kevin McCarthy became speaker, she surprisingly actually became a lot more of an establishment figure. She still holds all her right-wing views on a lot of crazy things, but she tries to align herself now more with the establishment, especially after getting kicked out of the Freedom Caucus. But her conspiracy theories, and I'm not even going to get into them because I don't know what YouTube's policy is, but her conspiracy theories and her rhetoric and all of that, she has garnered some serious attention from a lot of people in politics, in Republican politics. She's on national TV. She's a congresswoman, and not a lot of people in Congress like that make a name for themselves the way she has. And Greene has actually said that she thinks she is on Trump's list to be shortlist. But of course, if Kristi Noem is going to struggle with appealing to swing voters, despite being a governor and a former member of Congress with some extreme positions, Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to have a much harder time. Like, it would be worse than having Sarah Palin, I would say, as vice president. But it would be a really interesting debate with Kamala Harris. I would pay to watch that, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Kamala Harris debating. But that's her. Then next is Congressman Matt Gaetz. If you listen to the podcast, you know I talked extensively about Matt Gaetz earlier or late last year, because he was one of the architects of the removal and ousting of Kevin McCarthy. And apparently he is being considered, is reportedly thinking about being Trump's VP. I don't think this is one of the more likely candidates, but Trump Gaetz ticket would be one of the more interesting ones. But Gaetz has been one of the earliest backers of Trump, one of the strongest and fiercest defenders of Trump. I think when Trump announced back in 2022, this was right off the heels of a really poor midterm election, and not a lot of Republicans were going out to support Trump. Not a lot of people were at his announcement, but Matt Gaetz was there. And Matt Gaetz he's been a loyal fighter of the base. And Trump has repeatedly endorsed him for re-election. But I think what really drives Matt Gaetz's value is stock value is definitely what he did in the House, which was basically kick out Kevin McCarthy from his job. He single-handedly spearheaded that, and that garnered him so much attention, a lot of hate in the House. Like, so many people find him obnoxious and annoying for what he did. But people in the MAGA base, they loved it, and they revered him for it. I was watching interviews just from within his district of Trump voters. They loved this. They were like, go Matt. The thing is, though, Gaetz is actually interested in running for governor of Florida now that Ron DeSantis is probably not going to be coming back to the governor's mansion. Matt Gaetz is thinking of running for governor of Florida, but his, people disliking him in the party, people dislike him more than I would say they dislike somebody like Ron DeSantis for running against Trump or Nikki Haley. And I think that may be an issue. Like, if the vice president's supposed to unite the ticket, picking someone like Matt Gaetz could actually just do harm, and unnecessary harm at that. Like, Trump does not need anybody to change any dynamics in the party. And if he picks Matt Gaetz, that's just going to, anger people. So I don't think Matt Gaetz is going to get picked, but he is on that list, I think. Next is Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She is a familiar face in Trump world. People know her because she was Trump's press secretary for a really long time. I think she was his longest serving press secretary. He had 4 or 5. So she built a name for herself in Trump world. And she came out as one of the more vocal people, vocal supporters of Trump. She left, I think, 2019, to focus on her family. But where she gained some headlines was last year was 2023. In 2022, when she ran for governor of Arkansas. That was a big move because she is also the daughter of former presidential candidate and governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. So it runs in the blood, but she is currently the governor of Arkansas. And I think of a lot of people I've seen in politics in my time, she has had one of the more interesting careers. I would say being press secretary, working on campaigns to then becoming governor of a state. It's an interesting, ride. And I would say that, Sarah Sanders is one of those types of candidates that I think makes this type of thing work. She has been a rising star in the party. And she has tried to differentiate herself a lot in terms of the status quo. We had a lot of Republican governors come in 2022 who've been trying to cement themselves. I see Sarah Sanders a lot on social media, pushing out all the things that she's done. She's done a lot of stuff in Arkansas. I mean, it's as red as of a state you can get, but she has been doing crazy amounts of work for the Republican cause there. She's the youngest governor in the country, and she loves contrasting that with Joe Biden, who is the oldest president in history. Sanders has a close relationship with Trump, although she did face some criticism, I would say, for not endorsing him soon enough. That was apparently irritating Trump a little bit. She endorsed him, I think, in December, the same night of the 4th Republican debate. They had counter-programming. I think that was the 4th or the 3rd, but she endorsed him last year. But Trump was a little irritated by her not endorsing him. But despite that, I think Trump is big enough to put that behind him. They still benefit from a really close relationship. Being press secretary, you are working with the president every single day. You are you are the president's spokesperson. So it's not like you never see him. They had a really close relationship, and Trump had a nice, amicable relationship with her. And I think as a VP candidate, she would benefit a lot from her media skills. She has those savvy media skills. And of all of Trump's press secretaries, I would say she was probably the best. She knew how to handle the media really well. I think the issue with her is that she is young. Not in the sense that she's too young to be VP. It's just she's not had a lot of a political career yet. And that and she's only a year into her first term as governor. So I think it might be too soon to pick her. I feel like she definitely has more to do. But that doesn't mean that Trump won't consider her. Again, Trump is not conventional. So maybe he'll pick Sarah Sanders. Next are for the base candidates. These are different candidates. These people are people who are said a lot of outlandish things and don't have that type of credibility or are not well known enough. The only people that know them really well are people in the Trump MAGA base, and they are fierce defenders of the former president. Now, the first person is Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. I think if I put Kristi Noem as the most likely person, Elise Stefanik is number 2 for me. She is one of the people that I think has come out as one of Trump's best friends. in Congress, in DC, and everywhere you look. She's one of Trump's best congressional friends. I've always thought that she would become speaker one day, but as speculation emerged that she could be vice president, I was like, okay, maybe she doesn't want to be speaker. Maybe she'll go straight to VP. But I've always thought that she would be a speaker because she's a rising star in the House GOP conference. She's seen one of the biggest transformations, political transformations that I've ever seen in my time in politics. I think Tulsi Gabbard is one of those people, but she is definitely, Elise Stefanik is one of those people. She was elected to the House on a moderate platform a few years ago. After Trump came into office, she had this rapid shift into becoming a MAGA warrior. And ever since, Trump's arrival on the political scene, she has drastically shifted her views on so many things. I would say specifically what cemented her status as this, top star and top dog in the party is the election of 2020. She was one of the people that led the effort of election denialism, and she pushed against certification of the election back in 2020, and Trump loves her for it. And it rewarded her in terms of her career not too long ago. A couple of years ago in May of 2021, you might remember Liz Cheney was removed from House leadership from her job as House GOP conference chair. And they replaced her with Elise Stefanik. And she led that charge to do it. And in the years and months since, Stefanik has become one of Trump's fiercest allies and defenders on Capitol Hill. I just watched her on Meet the Press the other day, and she was going after everybody that was going after Trump. And she also said that she would be interested and happy to serve in a Trump administration. She said that. She said, I would love to serve in a Trump administration. So that's another indication that she's open to the job. Then next is Kari Lake. Kari Lake is somebody who I think is the weakest candidate. Marco Rubio is probably not like the strongest candidate, but she's definitely the weakest candidate. Kari Lake is the one-time failed gubernatorial candidate from Arizona. She gets called the Trump of Arizona. She shot up in popularity among the MAGA base very quickly for her election and electoral controversies, denying that she lost the election. She still says she did not lose the governor of Arizona election. She did, but she loves to say that she hasn't, and she is on national media all the time, and she copies a lot of Trump's mannerisms, and she's very much trying to emulate Trump. And I think that's one of the things that Trump really likes, because Kari Lake is literally a mini Trump, and Trump likes mini Trumps because it's like he's like, oh wow, nice, somebody who copies me. But she has had constant bouts with the culture wars, and she is always up in front, and people know her. She's campaigned with Trump a lot, and they have a really close relationship since she lost. One thing that complicates her chance of being selected is right now she's running for Senate from Arizona. So she lost the governor's race, and she's like, if I lost one statewide race, that doesn't mean I'll lose the next. So she's running for U.S. Senate from Arizona, and I covered this race actually. I can't remember when, but earlier this week, I think, I covered this race. And I was saying that she could realistically actually win this seat. It's possible. And so I don't know if she'd want to, be Trump's VP, because VP has not historically been a very delightful role to have, and Senate is definitely a better job in some cases. So I wouldn't be surprised if she says, I'm sorry, Donald, I'm not going to run with you for VP. I want to be a senator. On the other hand, she loves Trump, and she is a loyalist, and she will do whatever she can to appeal to him. So maybe she does go in with him. Who knows? She's also extremely, right-wing. So like I've said with other candidates, she's going to struggle with swing voters. Although remarkably, in that blue, red flop year that was good for Democrats, she was very close to becoming the governor of Arizona. So she might have an appeal among some swing voters. And last but not least, this is the least likely. And if you've listened to the podcast, you know my views on him. Vivek Ramaswamy. He's a presidential candidate. For whatever reason, he's still running for president right now. And throughout his presidential campaign, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ramaswamy has built his name trying to go with conspiracy theories and radical theories to justify his reasoning for many, big, comprehensive policies. And his general views of isolationism and curtailing the government have resonated with people on the further right of the GOP, and some I've heard have said further right than MAGA. He takes it a step further. So if Trump is really going to pick, if he were to, in some crazy world, pick Vivek Ramaswamy, it would be such a huge leap. And it would be embracing a further right stance than Trump has ever had. And I think it would be interesting. Vivek Ramaswamy, I think, represents the future, at least of one wing of the Republican Party. And he has that diversity story that I think would appeal in some cases. And he has those views that have emerged and evolved because of the MAGA movement, and now he's further right. So he represents a future of the party that Trump may want to leave a legacy for, but I don't think that it's going to be the case because Trump himself is becoming increasingly condescending towards Vivek. Like he is saying that Vivek needs to drop out, Vivek will drop out. So not necessarily the strongest endorsement of him from Trump, but that's okay. And so if I was to talk about the betting odds, we have betting odds. You know what betting odds are, but in terms of the VP betting odds, that's actually a thing. And I keep track of these betting odds, and I take a look at who people are actually putting their money on. People put their money on this. People put their money on who they think is going to be the vice presidential candidate. It's the same thing they do for presidential candidates, and they do it a lot in politics. There's a betting market out there. I'm not endorsing anything, but just for your own knowledge. So on this list, Kristi Noem is the most likely candidate, followed by Elise Stefanik. The bigger the number gets, the less likely you are. But Kristi Noem is the favorite candidate to be VP, and I stand by that. I think she definitely is that candidate. She has that relationship that is so important, but also that the Trump campaign made a bit of a mistake when Noem was endorsing her. They actually kind of made these posters that looked really similar to the Trump-Pence posters, but instead it said Trump-Noem. And I think that was a mistake. They didn't mean to do that. Maybe they did it on purpose. Who knows? But that's when I got the really good sense that Kristi Noem is there. Elise Stefanik is there. Vivek Ramaswamy, people put their money there. I think those people are losing a lot of money. Nikki Haley, I think if it's about uniting the party, and if by New Hampshire and maybe into South Carolina, who knows? Depending on how this primary goes, if Nikki Haley can establish the fact that Trump needs her to keep a united party, I think she could be picked, although she will face a lot of pushback. I don't think Tucker Carlson, Ben Carson, or Tudor Dixon are on the list. Tim Scott, there. Sarah Sanders. Tulsi Gabbard isn't even a Republican. I don't think so. She also attacked Trump a lot, so the Biden campaign won't have a shortage of time finding clips of Tulsi Gabbard criticizing Trump. Kari Lake and Marjorie Taylor Greene, it starts to become less likely as you go further out. Mike Pence, poor Mike Pence. He's all the way out there. Trump has said he's not going to pick Mike Pence. They do not have a close relationship anymore. But yes, that is my list of the candidates I think could be on Trump's list for VP. Who do you think is going to be on it? Leave your ideas and suggestions in the comments. I don't think Trump's going to read them, but state your views. State who you think could be Trump's VP candidate. But yeah, that does it for us here today at your this Ishaan S Show Daily. Tune in tomorrow for the Ishaan S Show's episode. We're going to talk about the debate that happened last night in Trump's town hall, where he did announce that he's made up his mind on a VP. We're going to break down and analyze all of it. So tune in tomorrow for that. Subscribe to the Political News blog. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads, and X, and whatever else. And keep following, keep subscribing, keep sharing. Thanks for everything. I'll see you guys tomorrow.